Hello and welcome to PRPOI's June live session. As India's largest platform dedicated to upskilling the entire PR community, we are delighted to present a June panel on a very interesting topic that is gathering steam and becoming a specialized vertical in PR. I am Tarunjit Ratan, founder of PRPOI, and this is a discussion all of us need to have today. So let's jump into the conversation on public affairs and its tryst with PR. The definition of this new vertical, might seem very similar to PR, but there is a hard defining factor that differentiates it from the rest and makes it into a specialized vertical that requires PR skill sets that you might have and others that you probably need to upskill on, which you will get to know today. Today, we discuss public affairs and, sorry, Today we discuss public affairs in the PR scope of work, along with delving into how, why, and what of the process, including impact success stories in a live session with a stellar panel of experienced professionals. And to moderate this discussion, we have with us today Tushar Panchal, who joins us as our guest host to lead the discussion for this panel. Now, a little bit about Tushar, as he's the founder and CEO of War Room Strategies, a specialized communication consultancy focused exclusively on political and governmental communications. He brings over 29 years of diverse experience in election campaigning, advertising, public relations, public affairs, global destination marketing campaign, research policy communication, and political communication. Who better to lead this conversation on behalf of the PR industry and get us the scoop? Before I add him on, let me give a shout out to Comms Adda for partnering with us and my co-founders Sonali Sokal and Pooja Trehan for continuing to bring valuable conversations on PR to the forefront. Let me add Tushar on. Hi Tushar, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So now over to you to introduce our panel.
All right. So good afternoon, friends, Indians and PR men and women. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Tushar. I am your host and moderator for the session. I believe in power of listening. So when Tarunjit reached out to me to moderate this session, so I gladly accepted it. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our panel to you. We have Mr. Arun Arora, a true veteran in communication and development sector with an impressive 37 years of experience. Currently, he serves as the Director of Strategy, Communication and CSR for the Chetak Group. His qualifications are as impressive and as diverse as one can imagine. His numerous awards and accolades are a testament to his expertise. I'm sure you will find more about him on his LinkedIn, and many of you must be connected to him. Next, we have Ms. Vasudha Jha, a professional whose list of achievement is nothing short of awe-inspiring for all of us. Her journey through telecom sector with Reliance Jio and broadcast industry with Star TV. Then she started feeding us through agriculture with Monsanto and kept us healthy through Glenmark. And that shows her impact on the industry. Currently, she serves as an advisor to Environment Law and Development Foundation. And finally, we have Mr. Sanpriya Gautam, from working with leading PR agencies across the country to join an industry association to become a voice of the industry. And then finally, working with a global conglomerate like Rio Tinto. His journey is simply superb. So I'm sure we will have an interesting discussion. Currently, Sanpriya is a director with SpaceIte. And thank you guys for being here and finding time to discuss certain things with us on a Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, I must say. And, so before we begin, since I am a moderator, I love this role. I need to set some rules for all of us. We will have a freewheeling discussion, of course, no doubt about it. But we will not become studios or Republic or a Times Now or no that's kind of studios. My request to all of you is that while we are not talking to each other, we will keep our mics on a mute. And we will have a time discussion, and Tarunjit will keep the time for us. And as a moderator, as a speaker of the house, my word will be the last word you will hear. And Tarunjit, when she was briefing me about the session, she said that no question is a stupid question. So my request to audience is that ask away, but please keep it simple and short. So let's begin our discussion. Very simple question to you people, that what is public affairs? How different it is from what we know about PR, and how did you get into this business? So that's how we will begin the discussion. We'll start with Vasudha, then we will go to Sanpriya, and finally Mr. Arun. Vasudha, over to you.
Thank you, Tushar, and thank you, Karunjit, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, see, you asked whether how public affairs is different from public relations. Now, public relations has been pretty much in the scope of communicating with the media, bringing up the reputation of an organization. But when you really think about public affairs, it is about the larger stakeholder universe. It is just not just limited to one stakeholder. So you can have different stakeholders like the government, you can have industry associations, you can have customers, you can have key opinion leaders. So it's really about building this sphere of influence, especially to see how the policy and regulation frameworks of that particular industry can be influenced. So basically that's the difference between public affairs and public relations in my mind.
And your journey, also very quickly.
My journey, I started as a journalist, and then I got into public relations, pure and simple public relations. Learned a lot about how you handle brands. I worked with some leading brands at that point of time, and then once after I joined, I ran my own PR agency for about 8 years in Mumbai, working across different sectors. Then I moved to the corporate with Glenmark, and my journey into public affairs actually started with Star TV, because there, I think broadcasting was really transitioning from being very subscriber, very based, that there were carriage issues and control issues and all of those issues, and really moving towards digitization. So therefore, that entire journey, I think, was influenced while I was at Star TV.
Wonderful. So I
And
think I have some questions around that. So we'll come to that.
absolutely, we'll talk
Thank
about
you.
it.
Over to Sangpriya. Uh,
Thank you.
Let us know what you think of public affairs in your end. How do you come into it?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Tushar. So I'll start that about my understanding of public affairs. So public affair function focuses on three key elements: monitoring, managing, and influencing the business environment. And the reason that every company or the corporate needs to monitor, manage, and influence its business environment is to navigate through challenges. And challenges could be regulatory, uh, political, policy related, tax related, environment related, or geopolitical in nature. And now we have also seen it could be health related as well, talking about 2019 pandemic. So yes, I think that PA is critical to build as a function. It's critical to build business resilience and to maintain a positive outlook about any company or the corporate. Now, coming to the question that how I got into it. So I'll rather answer that, how I got hooked to it. So when I started my career, PR agency used to collect the coverage for every client at the end of the month, and used to measure it in length and breadth, and then multiply the area by advertising rates of the publication. So what the PR agencies or the PR professionals were doing is basically creating that sense of value for their clients who probably wasn't aware that how PR is going to help them in any way. Then came one interesting PA assignment for a UK-based company, which happens to be the leading marker manufacturer. So just for the understanding of the panel, so markers are ready to any product to safeguard it from counterfeiting. And this company was supplying markers to oil marketing companies in India to check the kerosene adulteration in diesel. So kerosene was used as a primary fuel for cooking in the economically backward areas. And kerosene used to be sold through public distribution system, and I guess the cost per liter probably was 11. Diesel was at 45. So petrol pump owners used to divert this kerosene from public distribution system to uh, the petrol pumps. And after this marker was there, so people started getting caught. I mean, all these petrol pump owners were starting getting caught. One BPCL employee, Manjunath, was also killed. I mean, for everyone's interest, I mean, one can go to the YouTube and search who killed Manjunath or talk about this. So, idea behind sharing the story is that for the first time in front of me, the problem statement was very clear, and there was a blank canvas to find the solution. I think, and this is what I mean. That's how I got hooked to public affairs rather than PR, though I studied as a journalist as well, very briefly. Yeah.
Thank you, Sanpriya. I think Arun sir, a question to you, same question, but slightly different perspective. That I would like to know that how different it is from the public relation. As in, we all know what
Yeah,
public affairs is now.
yeah. Let me begin about how I got into public affairs, and then I'll just because Sangmitra, Sangpriya, and Vasudha, they've described the difference between PR and public affairs very well. When I was very young, long ago, when I was very young, I happened to write in my CV that I like challenges, and God really took me seriously, and He threw me a lot of challenges. I worked with various sectors, including automobiles. I spent half my corporate career with automobiles, including Escorts and Maruti Suzuki, and subsequently I worked with infrastructure companies, mining, oil and gas, and production manufacturing companies. All these companies were directly or indirectly uh, leading to or contributing to environmental pollution or road safety issues. So that is what made it extremely challenging for these corporates to operate and get the license to operate. So that is where the role of public affairs came in for me, and I really relished working on that. So broadly, I'll keep it very simple. The difference between public affairs and public relations is essentially understanding the business environment, as Sanmitra also mentioned, and understanding the likely risks. In addition to that, addressing these, managing these business environment issues as well as mitigating these risks is where public affairs people facilitate the management to maintain business continuity. So that is the basic difference. So it goes beyond general audience that we talk about, whether it is internal communication, employees, external communication, our vendors, dealers. In case you include communities from where we need a license to operate, and we also include the decision makers, whether it is the cops who give you permission, whether it is the electricity department, water department, environment ministry giving you forest or environment clearance. All those decision maker in the government side, they need to be convinced and facilitated in their decision making, so that they are not perceived to be favoring us, yet we end up getting policy in our favor. So that is the role of public affairs as against the person who is just into public relation. On the lighter side, I don't know why we use the word affairs, because once I and my wife we were mentioning, we were just teasing our teenager kids whether their friends had some affairs or something. So both of them immediately shouted, "Arey, affairs mat bolo na. Say they're going steady or not. Affairs is such a dirty word." And I was embarrassed. I was doing public affairs for a
No,
living,
so
and they find this word as offending. So that is the fact of life. I think we have to live with it. I always say
no,
that
so no. I
the
can vouch for
PR
that.
profession,
Lot of people
PR
say that
profession,
whatever affairs you can make it public is public affairs.
absolutely. And we professionals, PR professionals, we need to work on our own PR, building our own reputation, because even now, after so many years of professional PR, corporate communication, sometimes your wife will suddenly say कि घर में PRO की तरह बात नहीं करो. So those connotations still exist, and therefore I think we can all work towards enhancing our own reputation to begin with. Okay, I'll share a lot of examples. Let me come back to
No,
Tushar.
we
Yeah,
will.
yeah.
I think that's the role PRPOI and ComSADA and other associations are doing. So thank you guys for that. PR for PR is extremely important. So let me sum it up. I think we all know that public affairs is a slightly specialized version of so-called public relations, because public relations definition we have is very narrow at this point of time. But if you look at it, everything which connects the public is, and we have to have a relationship with the public, and government is part of public, but we keep them separate because they believe they are separate. The administration is part of public, but they believe they are separate. So anyway, we'll come back to the discussion. This brings me to a very interesting study. While we were preparing for this session, Tarunjit flagged off this study to me, and I read through it. That globally, 40% of public affairs professionals believe that the biggest challenge they have is to manage the internal audience, their bosses, their CEOs, managing directors, and people. So how do you manage that within your organization? So we'll start with Sanpriya, then we will go to Arun sir, and then finally we'll go to Vasudha. Over to you, Sanpriya. Sanpriya, you're on mute.
So, Tushar. So, thank you. So, I'll start with an example or rather a scenario. So, imagine a scenario that one public affairs professional is working in an MNC, and MNC does not have their core operations in India, but they have this large business services setup. In this case, it's understandable the senior leadership probably doesn't understand the value of such role at a local level, or let's say for one particular market. But let's say that a state government comes up with a regulation that says that every office in the state must have 20% local workforce. And now, overnight, this will become a challenge for the company and the leadership. And very opportunity for public affairs professional to showcase the value that function brings to the table will also come into the picture. And it will not take much time for the professional to craft a compelling narrative about the challenge and how the companies or the businesses will start looking at other neighboring states to set up their business centers or GCCs. So I think this is yes, this is a challenge, but I think over time, once there is a right challenge in front of the company, I guess leadership understands the kind of value public affairs brings to the table.
Wonderful. Vasudha, your views?
So, see, I think if I really look back at the pattern of public relations, 20 years back, public relations was a pretty peripheral kind of a function, right? When all the planning and everything was done, that's the time that, people came to PR and said, "Ki acha, isko ab, you put it out in the world," right? I think similarly, public affairs is at that stage right now, where people really need to understand the value that it brings to the table. And I think a lot of it can happen through demonstration of the impact on business continuity, like Arun had also talked about business continuity and Sangapriya had also spoken about it. And once you really see the power of public affairs from the perspective of building your reputation, handling crisis, looking at policy decisions for the organization, I think it will evolve to a function, and it is already evolving to a function which is very, very core part of any organization's leadership. So, to be very honest, where I am concerned personally, I haven't really had this challenge that my leadership team or my peers or my organization has not really understood what public affairs can bring to the table. But I do think that there is a challenge in this regard, and that will evolve over a period of time, especially with so many MNCs being in India. People are getting understanding more about public affairs, and I think a lot of institutions today are teaching public affairs formally, because earlier you didn't have the IIMs, you didn't have the business schools, you didn't have specialized public affairs organizations like Takshashila. So I think overall there is a movement which will really cement the role of public affairs in the industry, in any organization. So yeah,
So do you think that it's high time? I don't know whether it's happening or not, because you are the expert and you work in the sector, that public affairs professional already has a place on the CEO table, or it's still yet to happen?
Absolutely. I think the organizations who have already evolved to that level have a role for the public affairs, function at the leadership table, at the decision making table. And I mean, I've been part of those roles. So I would say definitely yes. But I think that's also a smaller percentage of the organizations, and gradually it is going to improve. So I think there is a huge scope for public affairs in our country at this point.
Arun sir? Sir, you are on mute. You need to unmute.
Hello, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. Very good points made, Vasudha and Sanpriya. Let me share an example which will illustrate how certain companies value public affairs and certain other companies do not. There was a time when big giants, steel companies like POSCO and Rio Tinto, they were trying to enter ArcelorMittal, they were trying to enter India. And I used to work with Jindal Steel and Power. We had well-established steel power plant in Chhattisgarh, and we had really taken care of the communities there. And then we were setting up another plant in Jharkhand in a place called Dumka. And Goda and Dukka, and we had this public hearing coming up, and they were, you all of us know, suddenly all the NGOs mushroom up as soon as some new big player comes into your town. So we had this public hearing coming up. So we worked with our promoters and we suggested that we take a delegation of the village sarpanch and people who are very vocal and some of these NGOs, and simply take them and show them facilities around our steel plant in Chhattisgarh. And we, fortunately, they had their own aircraft. We flew them over to Chhattisgarh. We showed them the development that we had carried out in Raigad, and after that, once they came back, they all became our fans. They were then fighting with each other that this steel plant has to come in our district. And they were fight between two districts, and both of them were offering tax shops also, and they were also offering space at a very, very concessional land rate. Now, in fact, we were fortunate that our promoters also had that understanding that public affairs plays a significant role. Now, sometimes what happens is when if you're working with an MNCs and some decision makers are not here, they're not connected to the ground. The amount of time that POSCO has taken, or ArcelorMittal have taken to actually establish a plant in India goes on to show there was something missing. That public affairs link was missing, to the management, between the management and the ground reality. So that is where the role of public affairs comes. Coming to your question, Tushar, yeah, increasingly, like Vasudha mentioned, more and more senior people in the management as well as the promoter are realizing the importance of the facilitator role that public affairs can play in getting clearances and getting the business continuity. Yes.
Wonderful. So, if I have to, give you a very quick question, that what are the biggest top three challenges you face as professionals? So, since Arun sir is talking, we'll continue with him. Then we'll go to Vasudha and then somebody.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll share those. For instance, especially for the manufacturing sector, and I've worked with mining sector and manufacturing sector for steel, coal production, coal mining, iron ore, zinc, aluminum, all kinds of mining. One of the major challenges is land acquisition, followed by environment clearance, and now add to that the forest clearance. These are the three things that are quite challenging. In fact, interestingly, I'd like to share that government has amazing SOPs in place. Environment Ministry is also Forest Ministry. They have extremely good SOPs in place. Now the challenge the people who are the decision maker in the ministries face is they cannot be seen to be supporting private sector. That is really very unfortunate. All the PSUs will get their clearances very soon, but as soon as a private player gets environment clearance without any hindrance, so people will tend to believe, oh, something wrong has happened there. Okay, so that is one challenge. So therefore, in case public affairs professional can make it easy for people who are the decision maker for them to take decision. So in fact, you'll be surprised to know, and I don't know whether I'll be speaking at this forum, at certain points of time, we even suggested to people who are the decision maker to impose some penalty on us, on our company, and I can't name the company I was working with. They imposed some penalty to establish that, oh, this person who's going to decide is very strict, and subsequently then we managed to get our environment clearance and forest clearance. So these are tricks of the trade that we all need to learn to make it comfortable for people also who are the decision maker. Very strange but true, that is how it works.
All right, Vasudha.
See, one of the things like we spoke about is the fact that public affairs can really influence the regulatory environment for business growth and continuity, right?
Right.
And if you look at certain countries, lobbying in that sense is legal, right? In India, I think one of the challenges that we have is that we have to juggle a lot of things to be able to create a lot of organizations and people and special interest groups to be really able to influence policy and the regulatory part of it, right? Um, and I think I as India is continuing to grow, the businesses are continuing to grow. I think it becomes very important for lobbying or policy influence to be formalized as a stream and to be legalized. I think that would really make a huge impact where public affairs is concerned. So I would think that that is one of the challenges that public affairs faces at this point of time. The second is that right now, while there is a demand, there aren't enough number of public affairs professionals, or people don't really understand, you know, what really public affairs is. So I think these are few things that if one can clarify, one can create that competence and that capability in the existing professionals. I think we will be able to move a great deal faster. That's my perspective. Yeah, thanks.
Wonderful. So I think, as Vasudha said, that lobbyist is a bad word in India, and we need to make sure that it is not. So again, a job for an organization like PRPOI to come into action. Sanpriya, over to you.
Yeah, so I'll just continue the lobbying. So I think lobbying got its bad name because of its origin in US and how it got originated. Mr. 18th President of US, Ulysses Grant, going to the Villard Hotel and the lobby being filled with the lobbyists. So I think it got some bad name from there. But I always believe that unless there is a money trail, unless there is any kind of corruption in the lobbying, right? In our houses, let's say there are 3, 4 people in a house, in any household, and they're like two children, two parents. So one children who is not so very good at studies wants to get something from the father. Now, how will he do it? He will go to the sister who is like good at studies, say, "Can you help me? Can you ask father to give me a bicycle this year?" Then he'll go to his mom and say the same thing. So eventually, what he is doing, he's lobbying to get the desired result for himself. So there is no problem in it. I mean, how I see it. But second is the challenges which I see that public affairs sector which we face. One is adapting to the ever evolving regulatory landscape, and there are various industries which are governed by states. And look at alcohol sector, look at gaming sector, right? There central guidelines are there, but there are state guidelines are not there. Look at the power evacuation business. Central guidelines are there for the compensation. Arun sir talked about land acquisition being a problem. So for ROW in the evacuation business, so states does not have how to compensate with the people, at what rate to compensate with the people. Second challenge which I see is managing expectations and the delivery. I mean, I'm talking from the consultancy side. So I think managing expectation and the timeline of the deliverables. So policy change can take 5 years or probably 2 governments, 3 governments, and sometimes corporates or the companies would feel that it should be done in a year or so. Like I'll give you one example. So this India imposed a very high duty, around 60% duty on the toys import. Mainly the toys were getting imported from China. Now all these MNCs would want to find a quick fix, but there is no quick fix. Indian government want to support its own industry, want to get the manufacturing done here in India. So yes, so I think these are the biggest challenges which I believe public affairs industry faces.
Oh, thank you. In fact, we are getting a lot of questions from the audience, but we will get to those questions in a while. Have patience. Some interesting questions, which I'm sure we will cover in our discussion. And if not, then we will come back to those questions. Now, as somebody who's starting or who's, want to get into this business of public affairs, where do we start? How do we get into it? What are the skill set needed? As Vasudha said, that now there are institutions like Takshashila and other who are offering those skill sets to develop and all of that. But where does one start? So very quickly, we will not take much time on that, but your views, let's start with Sanpriya since you were talking.
So I think any professional would require a combination of multiple skills, such as education. I think was rightly said. One is education. Second is research and analytical skills, and that interest in understanding how the policy works, how the government functions, how the bill legislative business operates in India. And there could be a second could be to how what would the right places to take education? It's not really required that you need to have education public policy. I see there are a lot of multiple lawyers or a lot of people from the other professionals who understands one particular industry are doing wonderfully well in this sector. And I believe that if anyone needs to start, I mean, he wants to enter into public affairs, I think they should start with an agency, because then their view remains pretty broad. They can understand various industries and their issues, and then probably wherever they find their interest, can narrow it down and start practicing.
All right. Arun, sir?
Yeah, I think Sangpriya made very good point. I would add to that. A public affairs professional is expected to understand the environment. He has to have this knack for figuring out what does it mean to have a policy change. He needs to do a lot of reading, a lot of research. He has to have a knack for relationship building. All these skills will come in handy. I'll give you a very interesting example. For instance, in case we can collect a lot of data and analyze that and put together some findings and then present to the decision maker in the governments, and then things become far more easier. I was working with Kane Oil and Gas, and as a private player, there was a ceiling on how much oil we could extract from Mother Earth. And then we decided to run a campaign so that we can convince the oil minister and prime minister and all of them to let us dig out more oil out of our Mother Earth. So we came out with a very interesting campaign wherein we studied data relating to how much forex India is spending in importing crude oil, as against that how are some countries like America and Russia and other countries, they are performing very well. And so we designed a campaign wherein we got in. You'll be surprised to know we got in, American president, Russian president, and Prime Minister of India on the front page ad with their quotation on the importance of self-reliance. So I personally sent a note to White House seeking their approval for the quote that we're carrying for the U.S. president, similarly to Kremlin also. And when we were talking to our promoter, they said, as long as you get Mr. Modi's approval, everything else is fine. So we can get away by, getting a go ahead from the embassy of these countries. So we not only got Mr. Modi's approval to his quote on the importance of self-reliance, he was so happy about this because he was talking of Make in India around that time. So we built upon that, and he even modified the quote. Once we had his quote, then we got the oil minister to tweet it from his handle. Just imagine a front page ad which is lobbying for enhancing oil production, saying directly as so. In the ad campaign, we got the oil minister to retweet it, since we got PM's quote on that. So understanding, gathering information, figuring out what will work for us, and how will it make it easier for the government of India also to support our initiative, linking into some of their initiatives, is what will give us a good knack for becoming a good public affairs professional.
Thank you. Vasudha, over to you, but I will weave in one question from the audience as well, that, are there any specialized courses which you can suggest, or any panelist can suggest, to become a good public affairs professional? As you mentioned, Takshashila, or anything else you have in mind, or what are the skills they need to develop?
So, I'll take on from what Sanghapriya and Arun said. It is important to have the interest and the acumen in public affairs, and a lot of it can come from hands-on experience. And I think, this generation of practitioners that we are here today, we have all come from hands-on, whether it was public relations or it was public affairs or corporate affairs, whatever. I think that is very important. But I'll just give you my particular example, and especially with the question that you asked from the audience. See, as part of my job, leading corporate affairs and communications, I had anyway got involved in the whole public affairs piece, right? But almost in 2019, I really thought that, their public affairs is not just not just simple communications. There are a lot of nuances, and there's a lot of structure, and there's a lot of
technique that goes into being a public affairs professional. So that's the time when I looked for a course, and I did a 1 year diploma in public affairs from Takshashila Institute in Bangalore, and they are one of the leading institutes. But today ISB, the IIMs, all of them have have public policy courses, short-term courses, long-term courses. One can experiment with a short-term course and then go on to do a long-term course, advanced course if they want to. And beyond that, I think it is also important for the mass communications institutes today to be able to incorporate public affairs into their
Right.
curriculum. So I think we are still pretty dated when it comes to the mass communication education in India. If we can have that, and then we can have agencies, we can have corporates, and everybody kind of join hands, and organizations like PRPOI join hands to be able to give people hands-on training, hands-on
Right.
experience in everything, like Arunji said, in research, and really understanding what is the hierarchy in terms of the government, what can associations like FICCI or CII or any other industry associations can do, what are citizens groups. So if one can really get a person or a professional to delve into all these areas and arm them with a bit of technical knowledge, I think that will create a really win-win situation for the future of public affairs in India.
No,
May I come in,
wonderful. I
Tushar?
think,
May
yeah,
I
yeah,
come in, Tushar?
please.
Yeah, sorry
Yes.
for interjecting. I just wanted to add to Vasudha's point. Amazing point, Vasudha. Yeah, I come across this Jindal Global Law School. They offer very good course in public policy. They're expensive, but they're good. Interestingly, I conduct this communication workshop for the IS officers who join railways, and I'm happy to share that we have introduced a module on public policy because these are the guys who are going to be the decision makers,
Right.
and I've added that component also. It's been a good learning for me, it's a good learning for them also. But you are absolutely right, so this has to be included in mass comm courses also, for candidates to be more evolved and more comprehensive in their professionalism. Good
Yeah,
point,
sorry, I
Vasudha.
So I
would
think,
also add to a little bit about
no, please.
what Varun said. Is that, see, beyond educating this side of the table, which is the public affairs professionals or public relations professionals, I think it is also important to educate, to create an environment or create platforms for dialogue between the other side, which is maybe the government side, or the industry association side, or the other stakeholders, to be able to understand
Sure,
where we come from. So I think that dialogue is also very important to make this
sure,
particular stream evolve.
sure.
That's it. Thank you.
No, perfect. I think, we are getting a lot of requests for case studies. So while we will not be able to share individual case studies, which I'm sure many of would be very interested in, but what I will do is that I will now get into the individual questions I have prepared for you. Like, for example, I know, Mr. Arora, that you worked on PPP models, so very specific challenges, if you can identify for us as a public affairs professional, that what are the challenges you faced? How do you manage internal audiences as well as working with the government? And I think, I would weave in one more question from the audience saying that how do you mix, or how do you separate politics from this entire thing? Because when you deal with when you deal with public affairs as a subject, politics comes into play. So how do you deal with this thing?
Okay, thank you, Tushar. Very good question, and thanks to the audience also for asking such informed question. Yeah, in fact, I was fortunate to have worked with PPP model on a couple of organizations. When I was working with Maruti, we tied up with Suzuki, and Suzuki had later a majority stake in the organization. As long as you are a public sector, so you can get away with a lot of things because government tends to trust the PSUs. As soon as some private player comes in, so suddenly the doubt, you know, comes on. So when I was working with Maruti, so we used to export cars to Europe, and suddenly Europeans started stopped imports because they wanted our cars to be Euro 1, Euro 2, Euro 3 compliant. which were later covered by Government of India as Bharat Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3,
Right.
going up to Stage 6. So, like Vasudha mentioned, we have to include trade associations into our lobbying effort or our influencing effort. So, fortunately, we had very strong SIAM, Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, as well as ACMA, Auto Component Manufacturers Association. When you work with them, talking of challenges, as a leader, you may have certain priorities. For instance, we wanted cars to be, Euro 1, Euro 2, Euro 3 compliant because we were anyway exporting and we were able to bring about those changes very quickly. But the other manufacturers were not ready yet. So when you go as a trade association influencing the ministry or heavy industry ministry who was supposed to take a call on that, then you're not aligned with all the manufacturers together. We faced a very similar thing while working with the airport. I was working with GMR, and we got the airport, Delhi airport, on the uh, public-private partnership model, wherein the arrangement was that we will spend the entire money rebuilding the airport, and we will pay almost 40% of our top line revenue to Government of India. It was earlier run by Airports Authority of India, and it was traditionally running into losses for years and years together. From the very first year, we became profitable. And one of the clause that allowed us as part of our agreement was that we could charge personal airport development fee on the passenger fare, which was protested by not only politicians, it was protested by politicians, the opposition, people in power, even Airports Authority of India, Travel Agents Association. But how do you build airports unless you spend money? If you're working on a public-private partnership model, so you have to spend money, you have to earn money also. So it has to be balanced. Therefore, we ran a very interesting campaign about before and after of the airport, and we also highlighted to the public at large that when we took over the airport in 2006, it was ranked 97th amongst the top 100 airports, and within 3 years, the rank came to almost top three among the top three in the global ranking for Delhi airport, or for that matter Hyderabad and Bangalore airports who've been privatized. So these challenges one faces, but we have to find ways of communicating with public at large. We have to find ways of communicating with the ministries, civil aviation ministry, DGCA, customs, immigration. There are a whole lot of stakeholders involved for public affairs. You have to take everyone into the loop, take them on your side, and eventually carry on with your work.
So how do you keep it separate? Is it intertwined with politics or it
It
is
is.
not?
It
It
is.
is.
Wishful thinking is that we can keep it away from politician, but since most of the decision making, though we believe that bureaucrats decide, but politicians play a very important role in that. We may wish to keep it separate. In our efforts, we can keep it separate. Eventually, when it comes to overall decision making, they are very much part of the game.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. Over to Vasudha. Vasudha, you have been part of broadcast sector. In fact, I interjected when you started talking about it earlier, but now I'm coming back to that question. The life behind TV screen is very different than what we see on TV screen, right? And you were instrumental in shaping that conversation, the discussion around content, control, and distribution, and everything. So, how did you manage that? Can you just throw us some light?
See, when at the time when I was with Star, that was almost about what, 2008, 2009. That time where the entire broadcasting scene was very different. There was no OTT, there was no digital
Right.
broadcasting. It was all cable that was broadcasting. And you're absolutely right. I mean, what happens behind the scenes is, I think, a lot more interesting than what happens on the screen itself. So we were dealing with three issues really, which was content, carriage, and control. Like you said, distribution is
Right.
carriage. And
Right.
at that, see, today, I mean, to be very honest, I'm really not aware of where the control issues, that conversation is with the government. But at that point of time, there was this constant struggle between the broadcasters, the news channels, and the government as to who's going to regulate it. So the news channels, as well as the broadcasters, said that we will self-regulate, while the government wanted to regulate. But obviously there would be a lot of conflict and crisis when there was a certain kind of content that came on. So if we remember, at that point of time, we had a lot of different kind of shows like Sach Ka Samna or whatever, which was not, or when you saw, so that was the issue with the control aspect of it, which we were navigating and talking. When it comes to carriage, what was happening is, because distribution was purely based on the cable operators, there was very little of the revenue that was coming back to the channels, and it was like 5 rupees per, per subscriber, etc. And it was not profitable for the channels to create differentiated content, niche content, any content that, so if there was one kind of content that worked on one channel, everybody else would copy it. So if you remember, at that point of time, there was a lot of similar content on
Right.
each of the, on the Hindi GCs. I'm talking about Hindi GCs purely here.
Right.
And so we created this entire campaign, where we got the entire industry together. I think one of those, that was one of the first meetings where we had about 32 broadcasting and news channel CEOs in the same room, which was organized by CII, where we also had the broadcasting minister at that point of time. And we all discussed why digitization is the next step for broadcasting. So I have been part of the movement which has really kind of had this conversation about digitization being the future of broadcasting, and we see it today. So today we see niche content, we see OTT platforms, we see we see transparency in distribution. At that point of time, there was no transparency. So I think that was something that the public affairs piece really did. And so that is content, that is control and carriage I've spoken about. What about content? Now, content, uh, again, content, this was a conversation that we had all the time internally, is that while everybody loves to watch television, nobody wants to say anything good about television. Everybody says, TV dekhega barbad ho jayega, kind of a thing. So how were we shaping the conversations around content, really contributing to the people, to the consumers? And I think there were also shows like Aapki Kacheri, which was anchored by Dr. Kiran Bedi, which really brought arbitration and problem solving at the grassroots level into the television studio. So I think there was a lot of interesting thing, and of course we had a lot of crisis, because you would put out some content, and somebody would have an objection, and we would have some dharna outside. So managing those crises, really preempting them, and really seeing what is it, how do we respond to it, whether we respond to it or not, who do we bring into it for specialized conversation. So I think this is how the whole corporate affairs team shaped the conversation. Of course, we were working very closely with the content teams, with the legal teams, with the governance, with the CEO, Uday, and everybody else. So I think it was a very, working at Star for me at that point of time was a beautiful time to really understand the scope. And we also partnered with Oxford University to bring in, international case studies into India. So, it was quite an extensive scope, and I think very interesting to see how public affairs could contribute to this entire development of the country itself, I would say. It's
No,
national
wonderful. I think, you know, thank you for your efforts so that now we have digitized content streaming on our mobile phones.
I was
Right.
a small part of it, but I'm very grateful to have been a part of that movement, because it gave
No.
me a lot of learning as well. So
So
yeah.
I think we are absolutely doing some wonderful talk here, and a lot of questions are coming in. Some of them are being answered automatically by your discussion. Like for example, there was a question about who is better in managing crisis communication, public affairs or Copcom, or probably who handles the crisis communication better. I believe it's a team effort, right? You cannot single out that crisis communication is done by a PR team or a public affairs team. You have different audiences to cater to. You do that and as a part of team. So I think Vasudha mentioned that as part of a discussion. Uh, uh, let's look at some other questions from the audience. But before that, Sanpriya, since Vasudha talked about industry association, role of CII in bringing together CEOs together, and you have been part of industry association. So let me come to that how important industry association becomes in a public affairs person's arsenal. As in, is it that important as we believe, or it's just a mouthpiece for the industry?
Um, yeah, Tushar. So yes, I briefly worked with CIA and its international division to promote the bilateral trade between India and Africa, and I have also otherwise also have closely worked with the industry associations, and I feel that industry associations, does represents the collective interest of member organizations. Uh, yes, there are talks, that but we have not seen in India that these larger industry bodies such as FICCI, CII, them becoming the mouthpiece of one particular organization, but rather they always take up the collective uh, uh, issues of industries, and that's why we also see that a mushrooming of smaller industry associations have happened. So every single industry, however small or big it is, now having their own association, just to put forward their demands, their wants. And I think from the side of industry association, I think it's a difficult task to striking the right balance between advocacy and maintaining the integrity. Yeah.
So I think, I'm weaving in a question from individual who's asking that what is more impactful, a corporate doing a direct lobbying with government, or the association doing on behalf of a corporate houses, or media campaign running on the background? What is it? Or it has to happen all simultaneously? What is more impactful, or it differs from industry to industry?
I think it depends on the issue, right? I mean, if we have to look at the public affairs function, so let's understand what are the different components of it. So there is a government affairs, which is a component, lobbying is a component, advocacy is a component, strategic communications is a component, ESG is also a very important component, and we are seeing how investors are taking interest in the ESG part of it. So I think depending on the situation or depending on the issue, you have to make that call. I mean, it cannot just happen that for everything one thing will fit in.
Right. So thank you. I think, there are a lot of interesting questions, but we are also, aware of the time which we are spending on this thing. Now, before we go to the audience questions, which I have identified quite a few of them, and in fact, we've been in a discussion, what is it that, you would like to flag off as the marvelous campaigns you have come across as part of a career, maybe, or maybe recently? If are there any campaigns which you feel are the good campaign, we should look at it from a public affairs point of view, maybe internationally, domestically, whatever. So, Vasudha, any campaign comes to your mind recently?
To be honest, not really. I haven't been in that frame of mind, so I wouldn't be able to point that out. So I'll give it to my other, uh,
No, no,
you know,
no worries. Arun, how about
to
you?
Yeah, okay. Tushar, thanks. Let me, before I answer that, let me acknowledge your role. You've been so patient with us because we PR guys love talking and you've been patiently listening today. Thank you. Very well moderated. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
And
sir.
thanks to Sangpriya and Vasudha for making amazing points. Now, when it comes to, I'll also add to the previous answer that Sangmitra had given regarding who handles crisis better. I
Right.
think Tushar, partly you also answered that. It depends on what crisis are we talking of. Supposing there's been a major negative article in the media, or there's been something has gone viral on social media, then maybe communication professional will be better placed to handle that crisis. As against that, if it is there's abnormal delay in your forest clearance or environment clearance, which is holding up your production, then maybe public affairs people will be better placed. When it comes to using corporate industry association or media or directly lobbying with the government, I think we have to use all three as a combo depending upon what you are pursuing. So you may require different tools at different points of time, and at times you can use all three as well. So responding to that particular one. Coming to the campaign, I can share a couple of campaigns wherein Sanpriya mentioned about using even ESG. Recently, we used
Right.
even CSR as one of the interesting campaign. When we were I'm working with Chetak Logistics. Chetak Logistics, we are automotive logistics company. We run those big trailers that carry big cars, and we create a lot of pollution. When we were setting up Chetak Foundation, we identified underprivileged truck drivers as one of the likely beneficiaries for our campaigns. And we started lobbying with transport associations, and we wouldn't get support from them. Then we started lobbying with other OEMs. We did not get support from them. Then we started lobbying directly with the transport ministry. Can you believe we lobbied for bringing about this change to the trucks that are being manufactured, that we ought to have AC cabins for the drivers for their comfort? Okay, and fortunately, we've been really fortunate that that has been approved. From the next year, all the trucks that will be manufactured in India will have AC cabins for the drivers. So we feel really delighted that our small
So
effort
that's
yielded to
yeah, that's
certain.
that's a wonderful to hear. In fact, I
Yeah,
read
yeah.
about that news and I didn't know that you were behind it. But
So
yeah,
we
thank
played
you.
a little part. We played a little part because government decisions are based on various factors, but we really played little part in that. Second was the campaign that I spoke about while I was working with Kane Oil and Gas, and how we rode upon the Prime Ministers of India's campaign of Make in India, and then we enhanced the messaging to allow us to dig out more oil out of India to save forex, to save current account deficit. We had huge data that we put together, presented to Government of India, their bureaucrats, presented to the oil minister, presented to PMO, and then parallelly we came out with ad campaigns in the Economic Times and Times of India on front page, and we eventually got permission to extract more oil because government also gains. We made a case study for what's in it for them. For instance, one of the
Right.
success of public affairs, professional is to make it good for the people you are lobbying with. What's in it for them? If you can convince them there's something for you, then you are more likely to be successful.
No, so at the end of the day, it's always about who's on the other side and how we can bring benefit to them. I think that's
Correct,
the bottom
correct.
line.
Or at least
Sanpriya,
perceive
over.
they.
Yeah,
Sorry,
right.
yeah,
No,
No,
I'll
no, go
just
ahead, Sanpriya.
take forward what Arun sir was saying. So he mentioned about India was actually dealing with the burgeoning twin deficit at that time when this lobbying was happening, and
correct,
at the same time another lobbying was happening or another work is happening because if you look at the India's import bill, 60% of the import bill consists of oil and gold.
correct,
Right.
So at the same time, we were working for gold policy in India. Making government understand, the gold demand in India is very inelastic. But again, I mean, it's a slightly a challenging topic to discuss within such short time. So I'll like to highlight one campaign. I mean, it's about same-sex marriages or the Pride Month. And now, when we look at the global content on our televisions, right, we are seeing this shift, that the television is making it okay for showcasing the people of from the going for the same-sex marriages and everything. And recently, Thailand came up with this legislation, that they're okay with the same-sex marriages. So now look at this campaign. I do not know who is doing it, how it is being done, but it's a global campaign. And governments are being influenced. The target audience is the government. That government needs to come up with the legislation, and they needs to be fine with these kind of they need to find with the same-sex marriages, and it's being done successfully. I mean, I know that at the time I used to study in JNU, we used to have a very small association that time called Anjuman. We used to work about gay rights, and then came the Pride Month, and I have seen this, this thing being taken up by everyone, and now it is a complete shift. So I think, yeah, I just want to highlight this campaign.
No, wonderful. I think we are bang on time. In fact, slightly overshoot, Tarunjit. Thank you for allowing us to have a free reign on this. Now, I have some questions from the audience. I think most of them we have covered, but I would like to point out a couple of questions which are very specific in nature. Uh, for example, there is a question which says, which asks very specifically about government relations. How do you define government relations? Is it more important than others, or is it very impactful for a certain industry, or it's impactful for every industry? So, we will. Vasudha, you want to go take it first, and then we'll go to others.
Sure. See, government relations is yet another specialization where, where like PR, like public relations, where you're pretty much primarily concerned with bringing, with your communications with the media, and really looking at probably digital communication today and things like that. And similarly, government relations is somebody who specializes in understanding how the government works. Okay, who can be your critical stakeholders in the government? How does the entire process of regulation and creating policy and all that works? Plus, I think sometimes it is also important for that person to have some kind of a regulatory knowledge, specialized knowledge, like for instance for pharma. Okay, so if you're dealing with the government from a pharma perspective, where do you get, where are you really well equipped to understand what is the requirement of the pharma industry, how the regulations work, how do the technicalities work? So yes, from a straightforward PR perspective, I think government relations is also very nuanced and needs that different kind of understanding for people to specialize it.
So I think
Otherwise, sorry, if a corporate communications person is working on government affairs, it also becomes important to perhaps work with the regulatory team or with the legal team to get that information to you, which then you can translate into communicating with the government.
Arun sir,
Yeah,
I know that both of you are very keen to answer this, but I would weave in another question to it, because
sure.
that's another interesting question, that
Fair enough.
how difficult it is, how difficult it is to have uh, public affairs or a government affairs uh, while you are dealing with an environment like India. So while we talk about government relations and understanding how government functions, all of that, but we are a very opaque system at the end of the day, right? How
Sure.
difficult it is. Where do we start?
So, can
One,
I, sir, can I start and I leave it for you to
Yeah,
answer,
yeah,
because I want to say
sure.
like a slightly different thing here. So I want to tell people or the audience here very rightly that government relations, or people often talk about how good is your government relations, right? So I really want to tell them it's really not required. Government is there to listen to you as an industry, provided you have the right narrative to tell them you have the problem, you have a genuine problem. So, and sometimes even when you get job calls, or also people who would often ask you, I mean, how good is your government relations with the, let's say, with commerce ministry or finance ministry? Is at the top, it's really not required. I mean, what is required is you understand your subject, you understand the issue, you need to understand, what really you are going to ask from the government. I think once that is clear with you, I mean, government relations probably is the easiest part of public affairs. Yeah, that's all I wanted to
No, I
add.
think,
And
yeah, no, that's a good point, Sanpriya. I think
yeah,
it's always a issue driven, right? So when you have the
yes.
right issue, then you can find the right audience, and within the government also you can find the right approach to reach out to them. I think very valid point. Arun sir, over to you.
yeah. In fact, very good points made by Vasudha and Sanpriya. And I'll share one more perspective to this. Not only the government relation, even media relations, what we experimented, what I personally also experimented, and as a company also experimented. I always believe that media respects us only if we are equipped with information, if we have some information that is worth some storytelling. So media will respect us. No one likes intrusion, just walking into to say hello or exchange pleasantries. No. In case we are adding value to media, they respect us. Similarly, government relations also, we experimented at least on 2 or 3 occasions wherein whenever there is a new minister or a new secretary or a joint secretary coming into your domain, can are you smart enough to seek an appointment? Besides your CEO giving bouquet, forget that. Can we have a presentation made for that joint secretary or the minister, giving them overall presentation on the industry, how who are the various players, what are the challenges and opportunities, and what is the global scenario of best practices in that domain, with no expectation, just simply you suddenly become a knowledge partner for them. After that, just look at how your relationship improves. So that is why that is how we experimented with couple of occasions, and we had amazing relationship with them. And relationship cannot be a bad word. You should be respected, not that it should not be seen as fawning or unnecessarily walking into for no reason. But in case you can value add to your relationship, then it certainly works.
So I think we had a very interesting discussion, and looking at the time, we will continue our discussion on the comment section of whatever live streams you have been watching. And wonderful to have you here. Interesting insights. I'm not here to sum it up because everybody heard what you had to say. Uh, Final words, as I said, it's my right, so I will. Public affairs or a government affairs or public relations or anything. At the end of the day, it's all about relationship. It's all about the kind of issues or the kind of opportunities we present to the other person and let other person understand from your perspective, from our perspective, make it beneficial for the other party. And I think that's the winning game. Uh, Another important aspect, whoever wants to be in the business needs to be good at listening, needs to be good at understanding the nuances of how things work. Be a good listener, be a good researcher, try to understand how every functions happens within the government or within the corporate, because ultimately you are serving both as a client, right? The corporate is a client because you are representing them. Government is a client because you are actually helping them understand what corporate wants or what public wants. At the end of the day, we are serving public. That's why it's public affairs. So thank you so much for spending Saturday with us, audience. Thank you so much for listening to us, the old guys. But thank you for being here. Over to you, Tarunjit. Any last words from you?
Thank you, Tushar, for moderating this so wonderfully. And thank you, Arun, Vasudha, and Sangapriya for joining us for this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
See you.
Well
Thank
conducted,
thank
Tushar.
you for inviting.
Vasudha,
Thank you.
Sangpriya, amazing inputs. Really good learning. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you,
Thank
the
Thank
you.
you,
entire
guys.
audience also.
thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Tarunjit. Thank you,
Bye.
PRPOI, Comset, everybody. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Com Sadda, thank you. Thank you, PRPOI.
Thank you. So that was Tushar moderating the conversation for us on public affairs, and that was quite some learning. So he was speaking to Vasudha Jha, Arun Arora, and Sangapriya Gautam on public affairs and PR. And if you have more questions, you can put them in the comment section, tagging the panelists, and we will answer them for you. By the way, all our episodes are now simulcasted on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, so you can watch it there too. Thank you again to Comsada for collaborating with us on this conversation, and my co-founders Pooja and Sonali for continued support on to the PR community and bringing such insightful conversations to the table. We will see you again next month with another equally intriguing conversation on PR. Till then, let's talk, engage, and learn together on PRPOI.